Hi, this is Pat Johnson, your sociology instructor. In this mini lecture, we're going to talk about the interesting topic of globalization. Globalization is defined as the development of social, I add cultural, and economic relationships worldwide. In other words, the world is interconnected. It's interconnected economically, socially, and politically. Let's look at some examples of socialization. Your clothing has tags on it by law, and those clothing tags have to tell where that garment was made. If you look at your clothing in your closet, very few of you have many pieces of clothing with a Made in the USA tag. Some of you might. You might actually seek out Made in the USA clothing. I like it when I find it. But most likely, we see clothing tags that look more like this. Not only made in a foreign country, in this case China, but also showing different sizing for different parts of the world. This is just one example of how we live in a globalized world. Now, globalization isn't just about our clothing. We can see globalization in many different ways. Let's take a look. We can see globalization in trade throughout the world, not only in clothing, but as you can see in this chart, in other items. This is just a map of where Starbucks gets its commodities. So beans for Starbucks coffee comes from all different areas in the world. They're roasted at different plants in the United States. And then Starbucks coffee is shipped, sold, sometimes in Starbucks stores, sometimes in grocery stores, but all over the world. So Starbucks is just one example of how trade is globalized. We could certainly look at McDonald's or many other different products to see globalization in the area of trade. We can also see globalization in immigration. I've mentioned before that my ancestors came from Europe, half from Ireland and half from Poland, and some came through Ellis Island. So here's the Statue of Liberty, here's Manhattan, and in between is this island, Ellis Island. And Ellis Island is now a historic place, but it was where most immigrants from Europe came through. In my ancestors' case, in the early to mid-1900s. So immigration, people coming into different countries, in this picture into the United States, shows really how we are globalized with the movement of people. We're also globalized in transportation and travel. That stuff we buy often comes from all sorts of areas around the world on large container ships. We're also globalized in our travel. This is just from today's WOW website. WOW is an airline in Iceland that has very low prices to take people from the United States to Iceland and then, if they want to, on to Europe. So you can get from Boston to Reykjavik and then on to Stockholm, Sweden for $129 each way. Another way we are globalized is through communications and knowledge. So obviously the internet is going all around the world. We can call people in different parts of the world. We are very connected in a communications network. This map here is interesting, at least to me. When I first started making YouTubes for sociology classes, one of my early ones was made 6 years ago, and it's that video on modernization theory versus dependency theory, where there's no PowerPoint, there's no graphics. It's just me sitting in this office talking to a webcam. And one of the things I noticed quite rapidly was that the hits, the watchers on that one video was growing much greater than just my students. So it's a video that I have set to be watched from anyone who has access to YouTube. And if you have your own YouTube channel, you can go into analytics and see just where your watchers are. Here is a map of the world showing the analytics for that one YouTube that I made called Modernization Theory versus Dependency Theory. And why I have over 20,000 hits on that video is because although the majority of people watching it are from the United States, there's also a lot of people around the world. In India, in South Africa, in other African nations, in Canada, I'm getting people watching that video in other areas of the world, showing just how communication and knowledge has been globalized. I dug into the analytics after I noticed that the comments were from people with names that I couldn't even begin to pronounce, and I wanted to know where those people were from. Another way we are globalized is through media and entertainment and culture. If you're like me, you watch various YouTube channels, and one of my favorites is Justine LeConte, and she's a fashion designer who is French, and she's based in Berlin, and she has about 500,000 YouTube subscribers to her weekly YouTube videos on fashion. Another international media YouTuber that I watch is somebody who has a channel called Mile 30 Adventures. I'm into travel, I'm into adventure travel, and so although this is a much smaller YouTube channel out of Canada, I watch that. But I gave these examples just to show you how we are connected through media and entertainment and culture. It's not all coming out of the United States. Another way we are globalized is through law. If any of you happen to be active duty military, you may have heard of SOFA agreements. SOFA is not something that we lay on like a couch. SOFA means status of forces agreements. So wherever there is a American military force in a country that is friendly, we have a status of forces agreement where we have an agreement on what laws are followed. This is just an example of the United States and South Korea. United Nations is another example of how we are globalized. What I want to get you to get out of this video is not so much being able to name all of these ways we are globalized, but to have an appreciation that the world is bigger than just the United States, and we are very interconnected politically, socially, and culturally.